The morning light filtered through the crystal windows of the Galactic Academy's main building, casting rainbow patterns across the polished floors. Sarah Chen adjusted her teaching tablet and walked toward classroom 47B, her worn boots clicking against the smooth surface. She had been teaching comparative survival tactics for 3 standard cycles now, and every day brought new challenges. The Academy housed students from over 200 different species, all eager to learn about the various worlds they might encounter during their service in the Galactic Exploration Corps. What made Sarah's classes unique was her perspective. She was one of only 12 humans currently teaching at the Academy, and the only one who had grown up on what the galactic community politely called a challenging environment world. Most people just called it a death world. Sarah pushed open the classroom door and surveyed her mixed group of students. In the front row sat Cleek, a crystalline being from the peaceful mining world of Viridian 7. His translucent body caught the light and scattered it in gentle blues and greens. Next to him was Jara, a tall, graceful creature with 4 arms and silver skin, representing the ancient Scythian Empire. Her people had conquered half the galaxy through superior technology and careful planning. Behind them, a cluster of Noxian students whispered among themselves in their musical language. They were small, fuzzy creatures with large eyes, known throughout the galaxy for their incredible intelligence and problem-solving abilities. Their home world was a paradise of floating gardens and crystal cities. In the back corner, keeping to himself as usual, sat Vrak. The Korthani student was built like a living tank, with thick gray skin covered in natural armor plates. His species had evolved on a world of constant volcanic activity and toxic storms, making them incredibly tough. Yet even they considered Earth to be an unusually dangerous place. Sarah set her tablet down and smiled at the group. Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to discuss adaptive problem-solving in hostile environments. Cleek raised one of his crystalline appendages. Professor Chen, when you say hostile environments, do you mean places like the ice moons of Sector 12? Or perhaps the desert worlds near the galactic rim? Added Jara, her voice melodic and precise. Sarah's smile widened. These students were brilliant, but they had grown up in worlds that were carefully managed, protected, and safe. Even Vrak's volcanic homeworld had established safe zones and predictable danger patterns. They understood hostile environments in theory, but not in the raw, chaotic way that Earth presented them. I mean environments where the rules can change without warning, Sarah explained, walking to the holographic display at the front of the room. Places where you have to think on your feet and use whatever resources are available. She activated the display, showing a 3-dimensional map of a dense jungle. The students leaned forward, interested. Most of them had never seen such a wild, uncontrolled ecosystem. This is a section of the Amazon rainforest on Earth, Sarah continued. Temperature can swing 30 degrees in a single day. The plants and animals are constantly fighting for survival. Some of the insects carry diseases that can kill you in hours. Others just want to eat you immediately. The Noxian students made soft, chittering sounds of concern. Their homeworld had gardens, not jungles. Everything there was carefully cultivated and safe. But humans live there? Cleek asked, his crystalline form shifting colors with curiosity. Some do, Sarah nodded. And not just live there, they thrive. They build communities, raise families, and call it home. Vrak finally spoke up from the back of the room, his voice deep and gravelly. My people respect humans for their resilience, but we do not understand how you survive without natural armor or enhanced strength. This was exactly the kind of discussion Sarah loved to facilitate. Who can tell me what advantages humans might have in that environment? Jara raised 2 of her 4 hands. Your species is highly adaptable. Your literature speaks of humans living in almost every climate zone on your planet. True, Sarah agreed. What else? You have excellent problem-solving abilities, offered one of the Noxians. Human creativity is well documented in our databases. Also true, but there's something more fundamental. Sarah paused, looking around the room. Anyone? The students exchanged glances, but no one spoke. They were clearly thinking hard, but missing something crucial. Let me give you an example, Sarah said, touching her tablet to change the holographic display. Now it showed a simple human campsite next to a stream. A human is alone in the jungle. Their equipment is lost. They have no weapons, no tools, no communication devices. Night is falling, and they can hear predators moving through the trees. What do? Find shelter, Cleek suggested immediately. How? Sarah asked. Remember, no tools. Use rocks? Jara ventured. Maybe, Sarah nodded. What kind of shelter could you build with rocks? The students fell silent again. Sarah could see them trying to think through the problem, but their minds were working within the framework of their own experiences. Cleek's people lived in crystal formations that grew naturally. The Scythians built with advanced materials and energy fields. The Noxians designed elaborate technological solutions. None of them were used to making something from nothing. Let me show you, Sarah said, moving to a storage cabinet at the side of the room. She pulled out a collection of ordinary items, a few dead branches, some dried leaves, a piece of cloth torn from an old shirt, and some rocks of various sizes. This is what a human might find in that jungle, she explained, arranging the items on her desk. Watch. With quick, practiced movements, Sarah began building a small lean-to shelter against the side of her desk. She lashed the branches together with strips of cloth, stuffed the gaps with leaves, and used the rocks to anchor everything in place. In 30 minutes, a human could build something like this, she said, stepping back to show the completed structure. It's not pretty, but it would keep them dry and hidden from most predators. The students stared at the simple shelter with fascination. To them, it might as well have been magic. But how did you know how to do that? Asked one of the Noxians. Is it programmed into your genetic memory? Sarah laughed. No programming needed. Humans learn by watching, experimenting, and failing. We try things that don't work, then try something else. We take ideas from one situation and apply them to completely different problems. She walked back to the holographic display and changed it again. Now it showed a human settlement on a frozen world, then quickly cycled through images of humans in deserts, mountains, swamps, and even underwater bases. This is why humans are effective explorers, Sarah continued. We don't just adapt to new environments, we take control of them. We find ways to thrive in places that would kill most other species. Vrak leaned forward, his massive frame creaking slightly. Your people interest me, Professor Chen. On my world, we survive through strength and endurance. Your species survives through cunning? Among other things, Sarah agreed. But there's more to it than that. Humans don't just think about problems differently. We feel about them differently, too. She could see the confusion on her students' faces. This was always the hardest concept to explain. Most species in the galaxy evolved on worlds that were predictable, Sarah went on. Your environments had patterns, cycles, established rules. When your people encountered danger, the smart response was usually to avoid it, hide from it, or call for help from your community. The students nodded. This made perfect sense to them. But Earth was never predictable, Sarah continued, her voice growing more intense. The climate could change without warning. Earthquakes could destroy entire regions. Volcanoes could block out the sun for years. Diseases could wipe out whole populations. Ice ages could last for thousands of years. She paused, letting this sink in. So humans learned something that most species never needed to learn. When faced with impossible odds, when everything seems hopeless, when any reasonable person would give up. Sarah's eyes gleamed. We get stubborn. The word hung in the air like a challenge. The students looked confused. Stubborn? Cleek asked. Stubborn, Sarah confirmed. We refuse to quit. We refuse to accept that something can't be done. We refuse to believe that we can't find a way. She walked back to the simple shelter she had built and placed her hand on it. This little structure represents something important. It's not just a shelter. It's a human refusing to die quietly. The discussion was interrupted by a sharp, metallic sound. Every head in the classroom turned toward the back corner where a new student sat. Sarah hadn't noticed him come in during her demonstration. He was Zelen, judging by the distinctive ridge patterns on his forehead and the way his joints bent backward. His species was known for their precision and formal protocols. But something was wrong. The Zelen student's breathing was rapid and shallow. His skin had taken on a grayish tint that suggested extreme stress, and his hands were shaking. In one of those shaking hands, he held a curved blade about 8 inches long. Nobody move, the student said, his voice cracking. I need to talk to the human. The other students froze. Cleek's crystalline body dimmed to almost colorless. Jara's silver skin went pale. The Noxians huddled together, their large eyes wide with terror. Even Vrak, for all his natural armor, tensed up like he was preparing for a fight. Sarah, however, didn't freeze. She didn't run. She didn't even look particularly concerned. Instead, she glanced at the knife with the same expression she might use to examine an interesting rock. "That's a nice blade," she said casually, as if students pulled weapons in her classroom every day. "Zelen craftsmanship, right? The curve is perfect for close quarters work." The student blinked, clearly not expecting this reaction. You're not afraid?" "Should I be?" Sarah asked, leaning against her desk and crossing her arms. She looked completely relaxed. "You said you wanted to talk. I'm listening." "My name is Keth," the student said, the knife still trembling in his grip. "My family, they're being held by the Crimson Syndicate. They said if I don't kill a human teacher, they'll—" His voice broke. Sarah nodded slowly. "The Crimson Syndicate. Nasty bunch. They specialize in forcing good people to do terrible things." She paused, studying Keth's face. "But you don't really want to hurt me, do you?" "I don't have a choice." Keth's voice rose to nearly a shout. "They have my parents, my little sister. She's only 7 cycles old." The other students exchanged terrified glances. They were clearly wondering why their professor wasn't calling for security, why she wasn't activating the emergency protocols, why she wasn't doing anything normal. Sarah just kept talking in that same calm, conversational tone. "Keth, can I ask you something? How much do you know about human psychology?" "What?" The question caught him completely off guard. "Human psychology," Sarah repeated. "See, here's the thing about humans that most people don't understand. We're predators." Keth's grip on the knife tightened, but Sarah continued as if she was discussing the weather. "Most species in the galaxy evolved from prey animals. Your people, the Zelens, came from creatures that lived in trees and ate fruit. The Noxians evolved from small burrowing animals. Even the Scythians descended from herd creatures." She gestured toward each group of students as she spoke. "When you're descended from prey animals, your instinct when threatened is to run, hide, or freeze." Sarah pushed away from the desk and took a step toward Keth. Not aggressive, just casual. "But humans? We evolved from persistence hunters, animals that would chase our prey for days, weeks, if necessary. We wouldn't give up. We wouldn't stop. We would just keep coming until our target collapsed from exhaustion." Another step forward. Keth raised the knife higher, but there was confusion in his eyes now, not just fear and desperation. "So when you wave a knife at most species, their ancient instincts tell them to back away, to submit, to try to escape. But when you wave a knife at a human..." Sarah's smile was sharp and predatory. Our ancient instincts tell us we're being challenged by prey. Keth was breathing harder now. Stay back. I'll use this. Will you? Sarah asked, taking another step. Because here's what I see, Keth. I see a young man who's terrified for his family. I see someone who's been backed into a corner by criminals. I see someone who's never held a weapon in his life and has no idea how to use it properly. She was close enough now that Keth could have reached her easily with the blade, but instead of striking, he was backing away. Want to know how I know you've never used a knife? Sarah continued. You're holding it wrong. You've got it in your dominant hand, which seems right, but you're gripping it like a writing instrument. With a blade that size and shape, you want to hold it like this. In one smooth motion, Sarah reached out and adjusted Keth's grip on the knife. Her hands moved so quickly and confidently that he didn't even think to resist. There, she said, stepping back. Now you're holding it properly. Feel the difference? Keth stared at the weapon in his hands, then at Sarah, then back at the weapon. The other students were watching this exchange with absolute horror. Their teacher had just shown a threatening student how to better threaten her. I don't understand, Keth said weakly. Let me explain, Sarah said, walking back to her desk. She picked up one of the branches from her shelter demonstration. This is a basic principle of human nature. When we're faced with a threat, we don't just react to it. We analyze it, understand it, and then we take control of it. She held the branch like a staff, demonstrating a basic defensive position. Your knife is more effective now, but it's still not much of a threat to me. Want to know why? Keth just stared at her. First, you're holding it too tight. When you're scared, you grip harder, but that actually slows down your reactions. Second, you're standing wrong. Your balance is off. If I bumped into you right now, you'd fall over. Third, and most importantly, Sarah's voice grew gentler. You're not a killer, Keth. I can see it in your eyes. You're a good person who loves his family. Sarah set down the branch and walked toward Keth again, but this time her approach was different. Less predatory, more concerned. The Crimson Syndicate chose you precisely because you're not dangerous, she continued. They wanted someone who would be clumsy, obvious, and likely to get caught. They don't actually expect you to succeed. They just want to send a message. But my family... Keth's voice was barely a whisper now. We'll be fine, Sarah said firmly. Because you're going to help me catch the people who threatened them. The knife slipped from Keith's nerveless fingers and clattered to the floor. Sarah kicked it aside, but didn't pick it up. You see, class, she said, addressing the other students while keeping her eyes on Keth. This is what I mean by human psychology. Most species would see a person with a weapon and think, I need to escape this threat. A human sees a person with a weapon and thinks, I need to understand this threat so I can neutralize it. She put a gentle hand on Keth's shoulder. The young Zelen was shaking, but no longer with aggression. Now it was relief. Keth here just gave us a perfect demonstration of human problem-solving, Sarah continued. Step 1, gather information. Why is he here? What does he want? What's really going on? Step 2, analyze the threat level. Is he actually dangerous or just desperate? Step 3, take control of the situation. Sarah guided Keth to a chair. He sat down heavily, looking like he might collapse. And step 4, she said, solve the real problem. She picked up her communication tablet and tapped it a few times. Academy Security, this is Professor Chen in classroom 47B. I need to report criminal activity by the Crimson Syndicate. We have a student whose family is being held hostage, and I have the details you'll need to coordinate with Galactic Police. Keth looked up at her with amazement. You're really going to help? Of course, Sarah said. That's what we do. We don't just survive threats, Keth. We eliminate them. The classroom was silent, except for the soft humming of the air circulation system. The other students were still processing what they had just witnessed. "Professor Chen," Zhara said slowly, "you turned a dangerous situation into a teaching moment." Sarah grinned. "Now you're getting it. Humans don't just adapt to hostile environments. We find ways to learn from them." 2 hours later, Sarah's classroom had been transformed into an impromptu command center. Academy security had arrived, followed by galactic police investigators, and then by a specialist team from the Anti-Syndicate Task Force. Keth sat in the center of it all, no longer the desperate young man who had pulled a knife, but a key witness whose information was already helping coordinate rescue operations across 3 star systems. The other students had been given the option to leave, but none of them had taken it. They sat in a semicircle, watching their professor work with the various law enforcement agencies like she had been doing it her whole life. "The Syndicate always uses the same pattern," Sarah was explaining to Commander Thex, the lead investigator. "They target families of students at prestigious institutions because they know these kids will do anything to protect the people they love, but they also know these same kids have no real capacity for violence." Commander Thex, a tall reptilian being with scarred hide and cold yellow eyes, nodded slowly. "You speak as if you have experience with such criminals, Professor." Sarah's smile was sharp. "Commander, I grew up in Detroit. The Crimson Syndicate is just a bigger, more sophisticated version of the gangs we dealt with there." "Detroit?" Thex looked confused. "That is on Earth, yes? Your homeworld?" "One of the more interesting neighborhoods," Sarah confirmed. "The kind of place where you learn to spot trouble before it finds you." Keth looked up from the statement he was giving to another investigator. "Professor Chen, how did you know I wasn't really going to hurt you? I had a weapon. I was desperate. I could have... Could have what?" Sarah interrupted gently. "Keth, let me explain something about humans that I think will help everyone here understand why we approach problems differently." She walked to the holographic display, which was now showing a tactical map of Syndicate operations across the local sector. With a few touches, she switched it back to an image of Earth. "This is where I come from," she said. "A world where almost everything is trying to kill you. The weather, the animals, the geography, sometimes even the plants. Most species look at Earth and think, how do humans survive there? But that's the wrong question." She zoomed in on different regions of the planet as she spoke. The right question is, how do humans thrive there? Because we don't just survive on Earth. We build cities in deserts where the temperature can hit 50 degrees. We put settlements in areas where the ground shakes regularly. We live on islands that are regularly hit by massive storms. Zhara raised one of her hands. "But surely you have technology to protect you from these dangers." Sarah laughed. "For most of human history, we didn't have any technology more advanced than sharp rocks and fire. We survived and thrived because we developed something more useful than thick skin or natural weapons or even high intelligence." She touched the display again, bringing up images of human cities, human art, human families. "We developed the ability to see opportunity in crisis." The room fell silent. Even Commander Thex stopped what he was doing to listen. "When Keth walked into this room with a knife, everyone else saw danger," Sarah continued. "But I saw a young man in trouble who needed help. When criminals threaten someone I care about, most species see a problem to avoid. Humans see a problem to solve." She turned to face Keth directly. "You asked how I knew you wouldn't hurt me. It wasn't because I wasn't afraid, Keth. It was because I recognized something in you that the Syndicate missed." "What?" Keth asked quietly. "You're stubborn," Sarah said with a grin. "Just like a human. They threatened your family, so instead of running or hiding or hoping someone else would save them, you walked into a room with a trained predator and demanded action. That's not the response of someone who gives up easily." Commander Thex stepped forward. "Professor Chen, we have confirmation that the strike teams have reached the first 2 locations. Both families were recovered safely. The operations at the remaining sites are proceeding as planned." A collective sigh of relief went around the room. Keth's legs gave out, and he slumped back in his chair, tears streaming down his face. "My sister," he managed to say. "Is safe," Thex confirmed. "All of the hostages are safe. The information you provided was accurate and complete. The syndicate cell operating in this sector has been neutralized." Sarah walked over to Keth and put a hand on his shoulder. "You did good, kid. You saved your family and probably a dozen other families who would have been targeted next." Keth looked up at her with something approaching awe. "But I threatened you. I brought a weapon into your classroom. I could have hurt someone." "You could have," Sarah agreed. "But you didn't, and that tells me everything I need to know about your character." She turned back to address the class as the law enforcement teams began packing up their equipment. "This brings us back to our original lesson about human psychology," she said. "When humans encounter a problem, we don't just look for ways to survive it. We look for ways to turn it into an advantage." She picked up the knife that Keth had dropped, holding it carefully by the handle. "This started as a weapon pointed at me. But what did it actually become?" Cleek's crystalline form brightened as understanding dawned. "It became a tool for justice." "Exactly. The syndicate thought they were creating a threat that I would have to respond to. Instead, they handed me the information I needed to shut down their entire operation in this sector." Sarah set the knife down on her desk, next to the simple shelter she had built earlier. "This is what I mean when I talk about human adaptability. We don't just change ourselves to fit our environment. We change our environment to fit our needs. We take problems and turn them into solutions. We take threats and turn them into opportunities." Vrak leaned forward in his chair, his armor plates shifting slightly. "Professor Chen, among my people, we have a saying, 'The mountain that does not bend will be broken by the wind.' But humans seem to do something different." "What's that?" Sarah asked. "You become the wind." Sarah's grin widened. "That's probably the best summary of human nature I've ever heard." Commander Thex approached the group one last time before leaving. "Professor Chen, on behalf of the Galactic Police, I want to thank you for your assistance today. Your quick thinking and unique approach saved multiple lives and stopped a major criminal operation." "Just doing my job, Commander," Sarah replied, "teaching comparative survival tactics." After the law enforcement teams left, the classroom felt strangely quiet. The students remained in their seats, processing everything they had witnessed. "Professor," said one of the Noxians, "this was not what we expected when we enrolled in your class." Sarah laughed. "Well, I did promise you would learn about adaptive problem-solving in hostile environments. Sometimes the best lessons come from experience." Keth stood up slowly, still looking shaky but much more composed than he had been hours earlier. "Professor Chen, I don't know how to thank you. You saved my family's life." "You saved your own family's life," Sarah corrected. "You just needed a little help with the execution. That's what humans do, Keth. We help each other solve problems." As the students began gathering their things and preparing to leave, Jara approached Sarah's desk. "Professor, I have been thinking about something you said earlier, about humans refusing to die quietly. Today, you did more than refuse to die. You turned a death threat into a rescue mission." Sarah nodded thoughtfully. "That's the thing about being from a death world, Jara. You learn that death is just another problem to solve, and humans are very good at solving problems." The students filed out of the classroom one by one, each of them carrying a new understanding of what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of different ways of thinking and living. Keth was the last to leave. At the doorway, he turned back to Sarah. "Professor, would it be possible for me to transfer into your advanced survival tactics course next semester?" Sarah smiled. "I think you've already passed the entrance exam, Keth. Welcome to the team." After he left, Sarah sat alone in her classroom, looking at the simple shelter and the knife on her desk. Tomorrow, she would have to file reports and answer questions about today's incident. But tonight, she just felt satisfied. She had done what humans do best. She had taken an impossible situation and found a way to make it work. She had turned a threat into a teaching moment, a crisis into an opportunity, and a potential tragedy into a victory. Outside her window, the lights of the Galactic Academy sparkled against the darkness of space, and Sarah Chen smiled as she began planning tomorrow's lesson.